6:12 according to that clock, 6:11 according to my phone. Thank you very much. I'm excited about your being here and look forward to our time tonight. Welcome to the Oversight Committee. I am Dr. Stephen Holt, and I happen to chair this Oversight Committee for North-Northeast Housing Strategies. Hopefully everyone has signed in, and if this is your first time attending, that you've left your email address so that we can make sure you are now put in the loop of correspondence related to all things pertaining to North-Northeast Housing Strategies. Again, welcome. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening. We have significant things we're going to cover. Just a couple of housekeeping items, and then I'll go over what we call kind of principles of agreement. Housekeeping items for those who may need to use facilities. They're right behind me. Of course, there is food. The food is free, and it is delicious. So I encourage you to get some of that. Also, the packet of information we're going to be covering is right on the two tables as you come in. If you didn't grab that, please do. There is a space in this meeting for public engagement or public testimony. If you would like to engage, or if there's something you want to share, we ask you to sign up. And there's also a sheet or a poster card or postcard or 3x5 card or something to capture your information and the idea that you want to talk about. So, in light of that, let me further the frame. This is a meeting which is open to the public. It is not a public meeting. And that simply means that all of the activity and the discussion that's happening around this table, you're more than encouraged to hear, listen, and be attentive to. The opportunity to testify or to share, we ask that it be connected to what's on the agenda for the night. If there are items, concerns, thoughts, issues, things that you want to make us aware of, we certainly want to hear about them, and there are a variety of ways for you to communicate that. If you've got some concerns about housing, if you run into some issues related to housing, we certainly want to hear about that, and there are ways for you to communicate those issues as well. And so, in order to do that, let me make you aware of all of the individuals you can communicate with, or each of the individuals you can communicate with related to issues outside of tonight's scope of meeting. Would the Portland Housing Bureau staff raise hands, please, so people can know who you are? Look around, look around, look around. There are some in the back as well. So you can grab one of these skilled, intelligent, capable individuals and share with them all of the things that we would need to know pertaining to housing. Also, there is a phone number on your outline or your agenda. Feel free to call that and or send an email. In light of that, thank you very much for being here. We are going to commence. Our Oversight Committee is light tonight. We have people who are out of town. We have a few that are dealing with health issues, and so as life happens, we find ourselves with the number of Oversight Committee members that we have. So in terms of decision at this moment, we do not have a quorum, and so as an Oversight Committee, we will not be making decisions tonight, but we will continue with the information as described. So first on our agenda are updates from the Portland Housing Bureau. Shannon Callahan, the interim director, that's a lot to say, the interim director, and Matthew Schabold are here to present information for us, and it is now in your hand.
Thank you, Dr. Holt, and North and Northeast Oversight Committee members. Matthew Schabold and Leslie Goodlow and I are here from the Bureau to give you an update on some of the areas of discussion, particularly revolving around your most recent annual Oversight Committee report, which raised some significant concerns about a variety of different program areas. And we wanted to provide you with an update, particularly regarding home ownership and also new quarterly reporting that you had requested and we had committed to, which we are going to show you this evening. So before I go into the presentation about where we are in terms of our planning regarding homeownership, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a reminder about what we had discussed at our last meeting with you in March. So we had discussed with you quarterly reporting on the progress of families and the development process related to homeownership. We had discussed with you that we were going to be working to actively managing the list of the families with preference policy families on the list for homeownership, and that we would be closely evaluating those households to understand their barriers and to look for strategies that might move them toward homeownership on a faster timeline. Since that time, PHB staff has conducted and met with partners on site to review each family for mortgage readiness and their ability to afford the homeownership options under that program. Based on our preliminary assessment, it became clear that at this moment we were not able to provide or do a complete assessment on those factors on all the households on the list, and that many of the households appeared not to have a clear path forward to buying a home under what are the options that is presented presently under the program by 2019, which is the deadline we had for homeownership under the preference policy for the original 65 families. So to move forward and toward homeownership, we believe we need to make some modifications to the implementation of the homeownership process, and that's what I wanted to discuss with you this evening. Okay. So our first action will be to move to a management of a single list of households. Just to give background to those of you who may not know what we've done so far, in the past is we had a collaborative of a variety of different organizations under the OGG Collaborative, and also PCRI offering different options to homeowners. This has created a little bit of confusion, we think, in terms of being able to assess where folks are and whether they're on a path that can help them move toward homeownership. So we will be contracting with the Portland Housing Center to manage a single preference policy list, helping us assess the families on the list presently, and also when we do bring on new families, that they will be the first entry point, hopefully alleviating any confusion, creating smoother communication and ease of reporting. We believe this will be able to provide you with the types of reports that you and the community require to be able to assess our program performance. In devising this plan, we have had a couple of meetings with our partners, one just with the Housing Bureau and partner staff, and the second with the Portland Housing Center. We have talked about our overall goals together, and one of the shared goals that we have, all of the agencies involved, including the Housing Bureau, is a desire to not complicate an already complicated process, to really streamline this for the families and make sure that every action we take is with them in mind. That is our first and primary goal, is moving to the single list. We believe that in partnership with our partners and with regular communication and developing the procedures for how we'll do that, we can achieve that goal. I also would like to say that the Housing Center has already dug in with us in the last couple days, have looked at what we were able to gather from the partners and started to create a template for assessments. We believe we'll have a very complete report to you at the July meeting, and I would like to thank the Housing Center for stepping in and our partners for being so cooperative in discussions with us about this new process. So with that, I'd pause if there's any questions anybody had at this point.
When you are talking, ooh, I'm loud. When you were talking about a single managed list, are we talking about a list, because I know there's multiple kind of pools of funds. There are the funds that were already deployed and there are funds that are to be deployed. Is this a single list for both of those funds, or is this a single list for the first group, so to speak?
So it would be a single list for both the first round and the second round. It is not a movement of funds. So the funds would remain with the partner agencies and the counseling services would. But this is a way for us to look at families on the list, see where they are in terms of being ready for 2019. If they're not ready in 2019, we want to make sure that they're given the option to go to the second portion of the homes under development. We don't want to bypass people because we have a goal timeline, but we can't make assessments at this present time with having both organizations having different pieces of information. This is not a fault of the organizations. This is a fault of, I wouldn't say it's a fault, but it's the way we set the system up. But we need to be able to assess those individuals based on the same standards, the same mortgage readiness, because without that, we can't truly tell what are the strategies and options we need to deploy. We have some thoughts, which I'll share with you at the next portion of this, but we really need to be able to know that the strategies we're using are going to help these folks reach home ownership.
So just so I make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying, I'm going to pair it back to what I think I heard.
Yep.
What you're saying is that you're doing an assessment of the current list,
Mm-hmm.
and that those families that don't appear that they're going to be ready for homeownership prior to 2019
Mm-hmm.
are going to be automatically kind of prioritized in the next round as able to receive funds in the next round, and then people that are currently on this list are going to get bumped, that have not been engaged are going to get bumped forward. Is that correct?
We haven't engaged, we have about 45 families on the list, and we have about 59 slots still. We've achieved homeownership for 6 families of the 65. So we need to repopulate the list as well, but before we take that step, we want to make sure that we know what's happening with these families and what opportunities are. But
So-
yes, our first preference is if someone was not, if they have all the other factors that will allow them to get a mortgage, our proposition would be that we give them the option to move to the later rounds before we open the list to bring new people up off the list.
Okay, so then the process would be evaluate the current, we said 45 out of 59 slots.
Yes.
Evaluate the current 45 families,
Mm-hmm.
determine their ability to achieve homeownership prior to 2019, give them those that don't appear to be ready, give them the option to be in the second round, and then fill the remaining slots with people on the current list. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a very simplified version of it, but yes.
Yes. So then when the second round comes up, there'll be kind of a prioritized list of people from this round who kind of took a little longer than expected. And then it will also, will that second round be opened up for new applications, or will we be filling that list from our current pool of people?
I don't know that we've made that determination yet, if we
Okay.
would be going down farther on the list or if we would be opening another application. I think we have some thoughts on that, but without knowing who we've got and how many slots, I don't know that we can answer that for you today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk with you about is something that I'm actually really excited to talk with you about this evening. Based on the initial assessment we did on folks on the list, we believe that there is a chance that some folks on that list will not be able to afford all the opportunities that we're currently developing. We're also concerned about timing. As you know, we have 6 homeowners out of 65, and we are trying to look for strategies that could move them into home ownership sooner. So we would like to talk about adding a new source of funding for the families that are on the preference policy. and that would be a non-geographically bound home loan product. And I will tell you that one of the priorities for Mayor Wheeler, and quite frankly for the Housing Bureau, is working to close the minority homeownership gap. And the mayor will be announcing the first dedicated funding stream for homeownership citywide next month. And he would like to make available the first 10 slots for those down payment assistance loans for preference policy families. We're very excited. We've never had a dedicated funding source for homeownership that was not geographically bound.
Wow.
So one of the questions we wanted to put before you this evening was, how would you feel about the product being offered to families citywide for the folks on the preference policy list, or do you have strong feelings if they should be focused in the North and Northeast area? As you know, the original goal was 65 families to achieve homeownership in North and Northeast. The funding we had available was urban renewal funding, which is geographically restricted, so it was geographically restricted. But with this source of funds, we have an ability to make a different decision. In doing a deep analysis of what's been available in the market, our team, which you can see before you, has looked at the average sales price and the number of homes that are available in each of these geographic areas. So the interstate URA, as well as North and Northeast Portland, and Portland as a whole. In Portland as a whole, there were over 3,000 homes sold at that price, under 350,000. In North and Northeast Portland, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a map here of the city. In North and Northeast Portland, we had 308 homes, and the average sales price is actually higher than the urban renewal area. So I would love to get your thoughts and opinions. I know it's a lot to have at first blush, and
The citywide funds, are those land trust funds or down payment assistance? I'm sorry.
the citywide funds that the mayor would be proposing for homeownership are not necessarily restricted, but these would be down payment assistance loans for the preference policy families, 10 new down payment assistance loans.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, personally, I think it's extremely exciting that the mayor's designated money to, or is designating money and prioritizing that around home ownership opportunities. And then the other thing that's exciting to me is that it's not geographically bound to URA. That's super exciting in my mind. So to answer the question you posed, what is our position related to opportunities outside of North and Northeast Portland? So, and I don't know if you clarified it, so let me ask a question first, and that is, would that impact the 65 families that have been dedicated? So if 10 people were to secure homes outside of North and Northeast, are we still committed to the 65 we originally said, or is that now 55 because we've got 10 homeowners?
At 65 plus 10.
Excellent.
Go ahead.
Prior, the renewal funds were tied to a specific area inside of the boundaries. With the funds that the mayor is going to release, that allow a person in Northeast Portland to look outside the boundaries and purchase a home.
Yes, precisely. The 10 down payment assistance loans that we'd pair with this strategy for families on the preference policy list could be available anywhere in the geographic boundaries of the city.
Thoughts from the Oversight Committee? I'd like to hear from each of you, or unless you need time to ponder. So the question on the floor is, how do we feel about, or what would we be adverse to, 10 preference policy families being able to purchase outside of Northeast? And then, as you heard, it would not have any impact on the original commitment to 65. So, thoughts on that?
If the profile for who's taking advantage of the opportunity is the same, I don't have a problem with it.
To me, it's really a question of mission, and I feel like the Northeast housing strategy is attempting to partially right a wrong that was done in this community, which was the denial of homeownership and therefore the denial of generational wealth. There's also the goal of bringing people back to this community who were displaced. So this separates those two goals for 10 households. But I do think that as down payment assistance, it serves the goal of promoting generational wealth and wealth building for those families who are displaced or forcibly removed from this community via eminent domain. So I don't have a problem with it, but I also want to say that there's a lot of people who aren't able to be here today, and I would like everybody's input. I don't think that everyone's input is going to be the exact same as mine before we vote on something like
yes,
that.
and as I mentioned at the beginning, we will not be voting.
Okay.
So we don't have a quorum, so we won't be voting, but I still would like to get the input.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll keep moving around the table. I don't have a problem per se with it being spread, going into other areas. You answered my question that I did have about it, is that these who are a part of Northeast who would like to return would now have a right to purchase a home. Sometimes those homes that people looked at was outside of the boundaries. Now there's a way for them to be able to make that purchase if they qualify with all those things and have funds that now can reach beyond the boundaries. I think that would do two things. It would help bring people back, therefore maybe not specifically within the geographical boundaries that we had in the beginning, but it would be a very great help to doing that. And I'll agree with Sheila Holden, as long as the profiles remain the same. We don't create another type of profile that does something totally different.
I think everybody said what I wanted to say. I think as long as it doesn't take away from the original 65, which it does not, and it utilizes the current preference policy list, I see it as a win-win, because it's not a takeaway, it's actually an addition.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of it. Absolutely in favor of it. With the caveat of everything that's already been discussed. I think the more people we can help get into home ownership, the more specific, let me be more specific around that. The people who've been impacted, who've already been qualified, gone through the process, the more of those individuals we can help become homeowners, the better. So, absolutely.
So, and with your permission, we'll bring this topic back to you in July. I think we'll know more about the families on the preference policy list and have a better idea for you about exactly how we deploy that. But my goal would try to be to encourage home ownership this year, if at all possible.
Sorry, I think you just answered my question. So the goal of those 10 additional would be to have 10 additional homeowners prior to the end of the year? Is that the time bound on that?
I think we need to discuss the exact parameters, but the goal would be to try to get folks who were ready for home ownership sooner. I think our thought is also that there may be some people on the list who would have difficulty with the DPEL in the north and northeast area because of the pricing, but may be able to buy in another portion of the city. And quite frankly, I think that there are some folks who may want to buy in somewhere else in the city. They just happen to have been offered the preference policy opportunity. So. Thank you. So the last two things that we wanted to touch base with you tonight are to finalize our recommendation with you regarding the down payment assistance loan forgiveness. You had recommended that we consider a modification of this program in your annual report, and we agree. So I wanted to bring back with you, I think you have in your packet, full information about what we'd be proposing. We would be proposing that forgiveness is phased in, starting at year 15, increasing by 3% each year after that until full forgiveness at year 30. We do intend that this change is not just a change available in North and Northeast, but is a citywide change. We would love to have your support on the program, or of course answer any questions or accept any changes you may have. Sorry, Leslie's giving me a note. Oh, also this would apply retroactively to 2015. Thank you, Ms. Goodlow. We were originally hoping to have this in front of council to change the loan product by the end of the month, but we're going to need to take a little bit of additional time. Our other committee that we work with, the Portland Housing Advisory Commission, reviewed this proposal briefly at their May meeting and asked for additional time to consider this at their June meeting, but we're hopeful that we will bring it in front of council shortly thereafter in the beginning of June. So I'd leave it open to any discussion or questions you may have for us about the way our proposal.
Okay, so I do have a question. I guess we're supposed to be doing this.
I won't be a stickler tonight.
Okay. Just a question, not for a lot of controversy, but would there be, so if you extend it to the whole city, does that mean that there's less leverage for, I mean, because you have to go citywide now versus the target market that we've been working toward here?
So were you concerned with the fact that these loans may be repaid and replenishing a source of funds for homeownership, or?
No, you were saying that the forgiveness would begin at year 15 and go through to the end of 30. And I'm saying, I don't know where the funding comes from that allows that to happen, but if you spread it throughout the housing product, if you will, or service area, then that means it's just that, it's spread out. And so you wouldn't have, is there the potential that you wouldn't have enough because of that policy to cover the homes that would be in the target areas?
No, I don't think it would have an impact on our ability to provide any additional loan funds. With any payments that we receive, quite frankly, they're somewhat modest. Most of the loans were not the size that we're now speaking of with $100,000 down payment assistance loans, but that just generally goes into a small operating pot at the Bureau. I don't believe that there could be an impact to us on our ability to get an increased amount of loans. It is just literally about not treating one part of the city differently than we would treat another part of the city. And in looking at our demographic data to how we get loans out the door, we're now at approximately 70% of our products are for communities of color, and that's citywide. So, because we did look at with an equity lens on this, and I think we could. Leslie, are you looking that up for us?
I can understand it if it's again toward the profile, but there is an investment that you'll have to make, or a cost that you'll have to incur by spreading it all over making it available to everyone. So what are the parameters around that? Would it be basically just those that homeowners or new homeowners who are low income and who are of color? Is
So-
that a question? Is my question appropriate? If
I
not,
think
just say
there's-
so.
No,
I
so
think
the
there's a little bit of
confusion.
What they're talking about is, Sheila, is recasting people that are already current loan holders and making sure that if there wasn't a forgiveness, like what we're doing with the DPALs moving forward, that those customers that are or homeowners currently, that they're recast to be able to follow a forgiveness program. So it's for people that already have a loan. So they're going back into their portfolio to make sure that the equity lens they're doing for the DPAL, because the original DPAL didn't have a forgiveness program. So
Okay,
putting that back on those. So it's not.
That's going back to 15, that part.
Yeah.
But I'm talking, but it's going forward as well, right? And for the whole community. Is that what I understood?
So presently we have homeownership funds in the URAs, and those are the urban renewal areas. Those are predominantly the interstate urban renewal area and the Lens urban renewal area. We have very little other sources of homeownership funds, have in the past. Occasionally we were able to use some federal funds for that. And we are talking now about a new city, so not this item, but what we just spoke about a minute ago was about adding a new dedicated source of funds for homeownership, which the mayor is announcing next month. We're very excited about. But this item that we were talking about here was just about how we structure the down payment assistance loan. And your recommendation to us was that we look at modifying our loan product. You didn't make a specific recommendation whether it should just apply in North and Northeast or whether it should apply citywide. So we're trying to be clear that our recommendation is any loan modification changes we make should apply to whatever loan, to wherever that loan originates from. So any down payment assistance loan that we have going forward would follow this structure. So start with forgiveness starting in year 15 and full forgiveness at year 30. And I'm not sure that it would have an effect on our bottom line.
Out that the whole idea was, here we are making this special effort for folks in this iteration, and to make sure that there was the creation of wealth down 5, 10, 50, 20 years from now and so forth. I would want to make sure that we have a way to capitalize that or to cover those costs, whatever your financial machinations you have to do to make it pencil,
Okay.
so that it doesn't come back and bite us. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay.
And so when you say for everybody, all of a sudden I'm sitting here today advocating for the original concept of who this is for, our effort is for. And so that's why I was just asking the question. So if you feel like your financial analysis of how this is going to be taken care of when you're not in that role, and the policy will stick and the numbers will pencil, then that's one thing, but that's my concern.
Thank you. And yes, I know this wouldn't hit for 15 years from now. So the financial impact, and I'm quite frankly hoping I'm not in this seat either in 15 years from now. But we did look at it from that lens. For us, the trade-off though is the wealth creation and the comfort for the families knowing that they don't have some uncertainty at year 30, that they can pass it over to their family members. Quite frankly, most of our, if we do see a loan transfer, it occurs before that, but we're trying to honor the families who have a long-term commitment with their home. And most often, I think what you'll hear from our finance team, we have a variety of different loan products out there through generations, and it causes some consternation when they're trying to make decisions about, you know, a family member has died, what happens with the loan, and quite frankly, the terms are silent. And so it can be, for us to have that consistency and clarity with families entering into these down payment assistance loans, I think outweighs any of the minor benefit to us. At year 30, we think that the value of this loan product is actually probably closer to $40,000 when you do inflationary costs, et cetera, and it feels like the proper trade-off for us to make for the benefits of the families who are receiving our loan products. So.
You just explain for me how the phasing works? Well, each year, maybe there's a reduction in their payment? How does that, what does that look like?
So it's just a forgiveness of the repayment. So our proposal is, we've looked at a lot of different other loan products that have a phased forgiveness. So it's what happens when you sell your home or it transfers for some reason. How much do you have to pay back of that down payment assistance? So what we'd be proposing is that at year 15, we would do a phased forgiveness, and then each year it would add 3% on top of that. We don't want to create kind of a hard and rigid line that you have to wait. You know, if it's, we've seen some programs that say year 15, year 20, year 25, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't creating a perverse incentive for someone not to leave their home, if that's what they wanted to do, trying to wait to not have to pay as much back in down payment assistance.
And at year 15, what is the percentage?
I think it's 50%.
50%.
Any other questions? Dr. Bethel? Okay. Jillian?
I'm just wondering, there's a fairly large group of people here today, and I was, could you just go over the difference between the down payment assistance and the land trust model?
There are different land trust models. These funds are only particular to down payment assistance, so they would not necessarily apply to the land trust model. Most of what we do with the land trust model is direct financing for funding of the underlying construction. I don't believe we have anything, and I'm looking to my partners in the audience nodding at me.
Shannon, I want to be clear. I understand, but I just want to make sure that the audience is clear. There's a couple different homeownership models that exist within these funds, and I just want to make sure that there's clarity, that there's a difference between this loan forgiveness does not apply to the land trust model, which is a model for affordability and perpetuity, rather than strict down payment assistance, which is a model for affordability today and wealth creation in the future. I just want to make sure that, like I said, there seems to be a lot of new faces that I haven't seen before, and so I just want to make sure that everyone that's here is understanding the difference between what we're talking about. But I have to say, I'm really pleased that the Bureau heard the committee and is making a move to address the concerns. I think it makes sense not to have forgiveness, even partial forgiveness, in the short term. It doesn't make sense to put $100,000 down payment assistance to have someone try and flip a house. That's not what we're trying to do here. So I'm really happy and supportive of this alteration to the down payment assistance program.
I think it would be great to hear from Dr. Bethel. You were the one who initially brought this up as something that we should examine and consider, so the less burden or not extra burden is being put on families in this condition. So,
Well, certainly indeed, I am very, very, very glad and pleased that this is happening. 15 years in and 50% reduction. This goes a long ways towards helping a family start and knowing that they will be accumulating some wealth and something that they can pass down to their families and not wait to the 30-year mark or even 25 years in and find out that, I thought that we had a balance of the family of $35,000. I'm just pulling a figure down. But we now went in and found out we have an additional 150. Now, where are we going to get that from? So now we lose everything, and what we were trying to do initially has been lost. I think this will be a great benefit to many families who are trying to purchase these homes, to know that they won't have and be saddled with a larger burden of repayment at the end, or even when they choose to make a move to another facility, another house.
Thank you. Felicia, was there anything you wanted to share?
No, I was on board with Dr. Bethel. I just think that when you cast forward 30 years without some sort of forgiveness, the person is actually elderly. So you're asking someone that's actually in retirement age to make a six-figure payment. And usually most government programs do have some sort of forgiveness program, so it's not like the city is doing something unusual.
Dr. Edwards, did you want to share anything?
I want to echo what Jillian said. I'm glad that you heard and took it back and really looked at trying to make things better. So just really want to express appreciation for that.
I'm sure that the others who are not here tonight would also echo similar sentiments. So, very well done.
We really appreciate the recommendation. It was very helpful for us to do an analysis, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So finally, I am going to talk with you about, and I'm actually just going to introduce this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Matthew Schbold. I'm sorry?
No, I was trying to get, you have quorum, so do you want to do a recommendation? Oh, we do have a quorum.
Oh.
We do have a quorum, so we can do a recommendation around this specific DPAL loan forgiveness. So I will just put it to a vote. All in favor of recommending to City Council to support the program that Portland Housing Bureau has established around forgiving DPAL. All in favor, say aye. Or you know what? I'll do it one by one. Dr. Bethel.
Aye.
Jillian.
Aye.
Sheila.
Aye.
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 And aye. So 100% support. Excellent.
Yay. So the final portion of our updates this evening is regarding a new quarterly reporting format, or a quarterly reporting format. I don't know if we've had one with you in the past. In your packets, you have a lot of information. You have updates on all the projects in the pipeline, and you asked us some questions around all of the different buckets of money and some reporting requirements. And so this is our attempt to put all of that information together for you regarding where we are with reaching our goals. And I'm now going to turn it over to Matthew.
All right, good evening. So just kind of a quick background and context for how we got here. I think one of the challenges that we've had at the Bureau is that we've been really unclear in our communication about what exactly the total amount of funding is going to each of the programs and what our performance targets are for each of the program areas. It's in part because we haven't had a clear quarterly reporting, but it's also in part because we really have, even though it's all interstate corridor tax increment financing, it's kind of come along into the strategy in different phases and different categories. So there was the original $20 million North-Northeast allocation, and the original housing strategy was an allocation of those $20 million plus some other policy initiatives. Then in 2016, when the city went through the TIF lift process, the process to increase the amount of urban renewal funding in all urban renewal areas that was allocated to affordable housing. The Bureau and this Oversight Committee incorporated that increased funding into our strategy. And then similarly in 2016, the Bureau made an administrative decision to also just use the strategy and use this community oversight body for our general base TIF activities as well. So we've had multiple portions of the interstate tax increment financing allocation going to the programs, and each one of them had different targets. And so for one program, you could have 3 different targets, depending on which funding allocation you were talking about. So in an attempt to kind of reboot how we present our allocations of funds by program area and the performance targets we have set, I kind of want to walk you through a concept that the staff has put together. And I'm not going to go through the table here, but this is just an example of how we have 3 different allocations of funds, but all going to kind of the same 5 program areas. And so while you may have $5 million, for instance, for home ownership in the Northeast $20 million allocation, $7 million in the TIF lift, and we've used $1.3 million of our base TIF. Really what we want to start talking about more and more moving forward is the Bureau has committed $13.3 million to home ownership. What does that mean in terms of our performance targets, and how are we doing on a quarterly basis? So we want to be able to do that for all of our program areas to improve our communication to you and improve our communication to the community. So just kind of going through to see how this actualizes, and we'll still be working a little bit on the format to make it easily readable, but I'm going to go through each of the programs and just talk through it. You can see here first is home ownership, as I just mentioned, where we had, again, 3 allocations of funds. The Northeast allocation of $5 million had a goal of 65 households. The TIF lift allocation of $7 million has a goal of 45 to 57 households. And then the base allocation, there was no increase in households served because that was used to help increase the subsidy. We've increased the subsidy twice for home ownership. And so looking at any one of those independently, you could assess the performance targets, but we'd really like to just say, as I mentioned, we've got about $13.3 million going to home ownership, and to accomplish the targets that the Bureau has committed to you, to the community, it means we have to move 65 households into home ownership by 2020, into 2019, 2020, and that in total, 110 to 112 households by 2022. And so you can see, and Shannon has talked a little bit already about some of the efforts the Bureau is working on to improve our program performance, but we're only 9% of the way toward our 2020 goal, and 5% of the way to the 2022 goal. And so we think this is just a simpler and more consumable way for us to be able to communicate to you and the community. One thing I want to note, just as a sidebar that's a little bit outside of just this reporting format, is with home ownership, one of the things we're working on, we know that we wouldn't expect an even number of households to move into home ownership each year, because it takes time to work with households, get folks mortgage ready, ready to purchase a home. And so we would expect to see an increase in a certain year later in the 2015 to 2020 time period. And that's one of the things we're going to be working with the Portland Housing Center on, is how do we assess that as a performance metric. So we may see an additional 2 performance metrics in here to try and capture that mortgage readiness assessment in addition to the actual purchase of homes. Jillian, it looks like you had a question.
I do have I think it's a quick question. And maybe this will come with a later assessment. Has the barrier to purchasing been the rising cost of housing, or moving families to the mortgage readiness stage?
It's both, and I think it is to come. We looking at the households that are currently working with the partner organizations, some it's because their incomes are at a point where they will have difficulty qualifying for a mortgage and using a DPAL with the current prices, and some folks are still working towards mortgage readiness, but that's something you'll see in our analysis with PHC at the next meeting. That's the metric we're trying to figure out the best way to represent.
Due to the length of time that this is taking, I'd It's my understanding that if someone starts making more money than would qualify, well, while they're going through the process, then would qualify them as low to moderate income homeowners, they would no longer qualify for DPAL, is that, or the assistance, is that correct? Or once you're in the program, do you stay in the program?
So, you can answer the Prosper Portland funds.
So we do have an agreement with Prosper Portland, and they gave us $5 million spread out across home ownership, home repair, and the ADU program that is yet to be defined. And so we would use the funds from Prosper Portland for folks that were between 80 and 120% of AMI.
But at the Housing Bureau is restricted by statute at 80%, is that correct?
No, for 3 bedrooms, we can go up to 100%.
Okay.
Okay. So, similarly to the home ownership, our home repair loan program, again, we have 3 different allocations of funds. Some 3.2 million from the original Northeast allocation, 4.1 million to 4.4 million from the TIF lift, and then about $750,000 from just our base regular TIF. And so, again, we want to consolidate that dollar amount into one commitment of funds for home repair loans that has one set of performance targets. And that would be 80 households served by 2020 and between 201 and 211 households served by 2022. As you can see, thus far, we've served 61 households, which is 76% of the way toward our 2020 goal and 30% of the way toward our 2022 goal. So that performance metric is looking good at this point. On the home repair grants side, we have another 3 allocations of funds, but once combined, we're looking at a 2020 goal of 160 households and a 2022 goal of between 1,020 and 1,080 households. And at this point, we have served 240 households, which is 150% of our 2020 goal. So we're well ahead of schedule with our 2020 goal. But we are only 24% of the way to the 2022 goal. So that's something we'll be tracking. And how are we increasing the number of home repair grants, or what we need to look at in terms of potential adjustments in the future.
With the home repair piece, I think this is something about this time last year I mentioned, and so are we looking at the opportunity to collaborate with those organizations out there who have other funding streams and a similar goal? I'm thinking of Multnomah County and their weatherization organization, where it's for low-income people. They have funding to help with weatherization and some home repair. And if we can piggyback on that with what you have, we could probably do a lot more homes, and they could help with the outreach to those especially the seniors and the low-income families that currently qualify under OWECA in those programs.
You want to turn your push button? So yes, we do currently collaborate with Multnomah County with the weatherization. We have the lead grant and home repair program, so that if someone comes through the door, that they get assessed for whether or not they need lead abatement, whether or not they need weatherization. But that, these funds are for within the URA. So that's why I think sometimes it looks like we're not getting enough out the door, but we do collaborate with the county.
And one of the other things that the ICRAC identified early on when they proposed the senior home repair collaborative is that there would be CBG dollars or somebody's monies that would be out there to help with the technical assistance or the advocacy side. And is that a part of this funding? Or is there a partner out there you're working with so that those homeowners understand the value of the homes that they have and how they can address issues around estate planning or so that the family can keep the home? If the senior passes, what steps they need to be ready to take and to understand so that the family retains ownership of the home.
We have not yet paired the specific services that you're speaking of with the home repair grants or home repair loans. We have been having a conversation at the Bureau most recently in the last few weeks, especially based on your comments to us at the March meeting and in talking to our construction coordinators. We have folks in the Bureau who go out and assess these homes with the families and talking with them about what the other issues that they're facing when they meet with these families, because they are, in their homes having a, some relationship with them. And there are a series of other needs that they're identifying with us as well for other potential social services or even some additional types of case management. And it's something that we have not yet wrapped our head around or figured out, but it is something that we're talking about because we are seeing some different needs as well beyond the estate planning. So we don't have the answer for you yet, but we will follow up with you shortly.
Thank you. And I think I provided you guys a copy of the original plan that was submitted to Housing Community Services around the program that CEP became kind of a hybrid of.
And then finally is the rental development performance indicators. So again, we've got 3 allocations of funds, 2 of which came with performance targets, and 1 has been used to provide additional subsidy to some of the rental development investments that have been made. These are some of the conversations we've had over the years as well. So consolidating all 3 and consolidating those performance targets, we would need to produce between 70 and 140 affordable rental units by 2020 and between 310 and 380 by 2022. We are 104% of the way to the 2020 goal at this point, and we are about 38% of the way to the 2022 goal. So making good progress on that front as well. So if there aren't other questions, or I'll just wrap up and then answer questions. Again, we're still looking at making some adjustments to the best way to present this, but we are moving toward consolidated reporting around the performance targets on a quarterly basis as a way of being able to be clear about where we are and be able to really address issues in real time as we see them happening, if there are any with our programs.
It was good to hear Shannon say that you're finding other things that are trending that those same households are needing now. So it would be good to know what those things are.
Sure.
Any Oversight Committee members? Questions or comments?
This is really helpful, this 17 by 11. It's really helpful, so thank you very much.
So, Shannon, you mentioned it, and there was really no pause around it. No, there hasn't been any quarterly reporting. And so thank you very much. It's something we've been asking for and asking for and asking for in terms of help us understand where we are, how we got here, what's going on, keep us updated. And then the simplification of information really helps. So I appreciate performance indicators for each of the categories. And then it's very helpful to have it all put together as opposed to how it was delineated. I'm sure we can have it done that way if we need it, but this is very productive and simplifies a lot of the information, so it keeps us on point. I appreciate it. Comments? Oversight? Anyone? Thank you very much. On our agenda as follows, we are going to make a switch. So instead of the REACH presentation on the Argyle site, we're actually going to go to Rental Development Partners. Wonderful. Welcome. And if you would identify yourselves.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Holt, and the North-Northeast Housing Oversight Strategy Committee. We're representatives of 4 nonprofits that have rental housings in development that have yet to come to fruition. I am Destin Verdun from Bridge Housing, Jessica Woodruff from REACH, CDC, Travis Phillips from PCRI, and David West from IHI. We share and have come together with the common goal of delivering on our promises made of a quality, affordable housing, units delivered, and the long-term collaboration between our groups to serve the goals of the North-Northeast Housing Strategy. We unfortunately also share in the fact that all projects are suffering from gap financing issues right now. This is due in no small part to 3 different pieces of information. First, the loss of tax credit equity associated with Trump's tax reform. Second, rising interest rates. And third, local construction costing escalations. Each one of our organizations has made significant time and monetary investment into their individual properties, and we would collectively desire to see each other and these projects succeed at the earliest convenience. We have sent a letter to PHB and the mayor's office that we are interested in developing a common strategy to solve the gaps. We have attended a meeting with the PHB and the mayor's staff to discuss the various funding opportunities that might be available and to review the opportunity for funding with the mayor's budget. They have indicated the mayor's budget is highly unlikely to see a change at this particular date. But we are continuing to explore other and all funding options for these properties.
So just to highlight the facts in the letter that we provided, we collectively, our 4 projects represent 370 rental apartments. We collectively have a $12.5 million gap. As of the date of the letter, we had collectively $16 million worth of funding applications into the state. One $5 million application has been declined. We do still have $11 million of LIFT applications into the state. We thought we would know by tonight what the results of those that LIFT round was, but that's been delayed, so we won't be able to update you on that until the next meeting. And as Dustin said, we just collectively, we feel the pressure to solve these gaps as quickly as possible because we know that additional time delays just add to additional costs for the project. So we're trying to work together so we can get these units to the community.
So speaking a little bit to the idea of readiness and getting these out on the ground or in the ground so that folks have these homes to live in as soon as possible. Just to note that 3 of the projects are ready to go in for permit, and the 4th is close behind. So these projects are ready to get permitted and then built rather quickly. And then, reiterating what both Destin and Jessica said, the cheapest and best solution to getting these done most quickly is to take advantage of the readiness to proceed. Really a significant amount of investment that each of us as organizations have made in these developments so far, and to get them moving as quickly as possible. With interest rates and construction costs rising, a different funding opportunity, a modified product, those will not be able to deliver the units quite as quickly or effectively. Sort of circling back around to what Destin mentioned about our conversations with the mayor's office and the Housing Bureau. Housing Bureau has asked us to hold discussion of additional funding with them at the moment until the lift awards that Jessica mentioned have been clarified and the results of those. And we think in the next couple weeks we should know about that.
And I just wanted to add that all four of our organizations would be happy to have a special meeting or working session with the committee after lift funds are awarded and after we meet with PHB, which we expect to be in early June. So if that's something the committee would like or find useful, we're happy to make ourselves available for that.
Well, thank you. Is there a specific ask of us?
At this time, I don't think we have a specific ask. Like I said, we originally thought we'd know more about our current funding applications. I think it's more the offer, as like we mentioned, that we're working with PHB collectively, is if it was valuable to the committee to have a kind of a special meeting in June to better understand the gaps or talk with us about that, we're happy to do so. But so it's an offer.
Before I go on. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Jessica, if I know several of you guys have lift funds and only 50% of you guys in the room will get it, I assume, based off of the state's just process, will your projects be able to pencil out without the lift funds? Will you be able to move forward without the lift funds?
So that's part of the question, and what we're going to be working with Portland Housing Bureau, and part of that offer to come to this committee is we don't expect that LIFT can solve the gaps of all of these projects. 3 of the 4 are in for LIFT requests, so we know just by that fact it won't solve all of them. And so we know, we're hopeful that collectively we get some of the LIFT funds. And then we would really have to be brainstorming about what our options are to solve the gaps on the projects that aren't. And I think there's on each one of our projects, there's ideas of how we might do that, but they're all a little bit different.
Do you know what you each would need from PHB? If there was funding available, I'm being very clear. I don't know if there's funding available. So I want to be really clear, because one of the things that Bishop Holt was asking, our chair, is it's helpful for us if you have a specific ask. So that way that gives us something to work with and be able to work with both PHB staff and the mayor's office, because that would be really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I think, so we do, of course, know what our individual gaps are, but I think that that's something we are meeting with Portland Housing Bureau on the 24th, I believe, which we may even need another meeting if the LIFT funds aren't announced, but I think that's what we're hoping, that we would work through more of that strategy and then be able to clarify that.
We've all got very different LIFT asks, and so depending on who gets funded through LIFT, if any of us get funded through LIFT, it would be a very different set of numbers.
In your letter, you have a number of asks of the committee to collectively meet with you guys on. And one of the things I was curious about is the collaboration to work with us to set up a preference policy work group to support the successful lease-up and long-term operation of the apartments, meeting the goals of the preference policy.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're really excited about is working together for the long-term success of all these projects, make sure that the preference policy gets rolled out as effectively as possible, ad infinitum. I mean, we're talking about projects that will hopefully be surviving 60, 99 years, be able to support the preference policy.
So how, fill in the gap, how does that affect how you would like to see us working together on the preference policy at all? I mean, will it become easier if you get the money to do what's already there? Or are you saying that's something that needs to change because of the changing marketplace, no matter?
I think that's separate from the gap financing issue, if that's what you're asking, yes. It's separate issues.
Okay.
It's overlapping. It's overlapping priorities when it comes to funding sources. So enacting the preference policy as well as working with whatever other restrictions. So if there was funding from Veterans Administration. The Veterans Administration wants you to prioritize veterans, but how to do that within the context of the preference policy. If I'm understanding you correctly, that's the kind of roundtable that we're looking for the implementation, or is that not correct?
No, that's not exactly correct. There certainly would be a subject within that working group, for sure. I mean, it's just make sure that it rolls out as smoothly and effectively as possible. And that is one of the issues that is a potential trip point that we've identified, Portland Housing Bureau has identified. We've identified.
Sheila, did you have something else? This is our moment. This is where we do our work. This is what we do. So please ask, share, respond.
No, I just, that struck me as something, we'd had some conversation earlier on about the preference policy and how it may impact how you're able to be successful at meeting your goals and objectives. And so that's what I was trying to figure out from this, if that is that the road you were going down with this or not. So what specifically are you, it's not her thing, so what specifically are you talking about here then?
So I think
Refresh my memory.
Yeah, I think the more specific request that was in the letter was around, so we've been working with the preference policy on a little bit of a project by project basis, or maybe a couple projects if they're coming online at the same time, or a couple developments as they're coming online at the same time. And one of the things that, and this is probably just one of the things that we want to partner with the Housing Bureau and work through collectively as all of the developers working in North and Northeast, to make certain that we're all at the table and all have a common understanding. But I think right now the developments that are beginning to come online, we're figuring out some of the tripping points, and we're figuring out some of the particulars of how the preference policy can work and how in some areas where it doesn't quite work. And our ask, it's more informational, I think, at this point for the Oversight Committee, and more just a comment of, as the preference policy gets figured out, we all need to be at the table and doing things in the same way.
Strongly encouraged. Conversation I had with Dan about a month ago, encouraging a collaborative effort of all the partners, especially as it relates to discussions around the preference policy. It just makes sense to me that there would be an engagement of all people with all those who are playing in these waters to figure out how do we do this together and how do we do this in a way that makes sense and benefits as many people as possible and has consistency in approach and consistency in language, so that we can reduce and remove unnecessary blockades and barriers. And getting in front of that is most encouraged. So I support that idea 100%.
First, I just wanted to say with the LIFT application, may the odds be ever in your favor. Welcome to the Affordable Housing Hunger Games. But also, I wanted to take just a second to congratulate Bridge Meadows, PCRI, and Central City Concern for bringing the 146 units online this year. I think when we're a little bit bogged down in what's not happening, and I just want to put a little bit of focus on what is happening, and I'm really excited that those are getting built, that those are going to be open if it's on schedule before the fall of this year, before the school year starts. So I just wanted to say congratulations. It's not a dig at any other organization, just want to be sure, but just congratulations on that.
Good work.
So related to that, is there a need to do, are there folks scheduled for these units already, or you have so is reviewing the preference policy collaboratively prior to this something that's valuable if you're finishing construction by August of this summer?
So we've already sent, we've already run the application round for the preference policy for both the Beatrice Morrow and the Charlotte B. Rutherford, and the lists are with the leasing staff with both organizations at this point. So I think to the extent that there's discussions, it would probably be future rounds, given that the names are already with the property managers.
So they are.
Yes.
Folks assigned to these
Yeah,
already.
well, I don't know if they're assigned, but we sent the list of applicants that ordered by preference over a few weeks ago. So.
Okay.
And we can give a, Leslie just whispered to me that, we've also had some folks that have voluntarily opted into the preference policy to use our list of names to lease up their buildings. So I think at a future meeting, it would be good to just give an overview of where we are on that on the rental side, because we are having a lot of great successes. Yes.
Any other comments?
So the request is for projects that are currently underway or some stage of implementation, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So the request and the letter that you all have is really around 4 projects that have already received reservations of funds from the Housing Bureau, that have already been projects that have been discussed and as developments. I think hopefully I'm not using the wrong word here, but selected by the Housing Bureau to move forward. The issue is just that the funds that have been reserved for the developments at this stage, because of the 3 factors of tax reform, interest rates, and construction inflation, the funds that have been reserved are not enough to, with the other sources that we're leveraging, there's still a gap in the financing and not sufficient funds to completely finance the projects and move them forward.
I get that. So I'm just wondering if there's a bigger question, because those are current projects. I don't suppose you're going to stop there. Are you not going to find yourself in the same position as you continue to develop? And so is there a bigger question about how you get support from the city or from PHB going forward? I mean, you're addressing an issue for right now, but I think there's a longer term problem that you will encounter.
Yeah, it's a planning problem. So what happened is all of these 3 factors happened after we got reservations of fund, after we proposed a certain financing scenario, and then these impacts, which were out of our control, created this gap in the overall projects. So moving forward, knowing what the financing availabilities are and the situation is, people will be able to plan better for future projects.
And I think it's worth adding to what Dustin noted, that these 3 particular situations have happened at the same time and at a scale that really we've never seen before in affordable housing finance. And so all of the projecting and planning and cushion that we build into our projects to insulate them against changes, what's happened in the past 6-8 months in terms of affordable housing finance is just at a scale that we've never seen before and couldn't adequately have envisioned.
So I think a lot of times disappointment is a result of unmet expectations, and I don't personally have any problem with a development taking a long period of time from the time it receives an award from PHB or TriMet, especially if that award is a land donation, because you can't do anything until you have site control, and why would you spend a ton of money before you have site control? But I think that it would be great going forward to know when that is the expectation, when that money that is being allocated in a NOFA is considered first money in. Happy for PHB to be first money in. Somebody has to be first money in or nothing gets done. But when there's an expectation for this committee that things are gonna move at a clip of we're gonna have housing online in 18 months, and it turns out to be 48 months, there's a lot of anxiety and loss of trust. So I think that might be something else for a working group or us to discuss, is just how to manage that expectation, not just for us, but for the community at large. Because, like I said, somebody has to be first money in, not a problem. If the expectation is that PHB is the last money in, and that's the last money that you need to proceed, and then it takes 3 or 4 years, I think that that's a problem. But if it's the land, then that's not a problem for me in particular. So I think it's just to get an understanding of what funds are expected to go, you know, what that timeline is, just to the committee, just when it's, you know, when we're presenting those, the next NOFA round. It would just be great to have that expectation set so that there's not the anxiety and disappointment and an upset that we've been feeling. You know, again, I think it's about a really open and honest communication, which is sometimes tough to do, but it would be preferable.
And if I could just underline again, we've got 3 of the 4 projects are ready to go in for permit. And so as nonprofits, we are on track and on schedule. We are spending a little bit of time chasing our tail because every quarter that goes by, the construction prices keep on escalating. So there is a real impetus to get this stuff done fast on our point of view as well as yours.
I don't doubt it.
Well, I appreciate the presentation and the letter. Mostly what I appreciate is a collaborative effort. I think that having lived in the nonprofit world, I fully understand the Hunger Games reality, that everyone is scrapping to get done what they need to do. But there is something true to we can accomplish more together than we can apart. And so I hope that your collective wisdom and energy and strategy will stretch beyond just filling the gaps and figuring out the funding, but it will look into how to effectively engage and support the community. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda, Reach.
Great, thank you very much. And for also the agenda switch, hopefully that will help give some bigger context. And now we'll go in a little deeper just on the Argyle project, which is one of the 4 projects that was just being referred to in general. So we're coming to give you an update. Thank you for honoring the request. I'm Dan Valliere, so I'm the CEO at Reach. With me,
I'm Pamela Benoit. I'm the COO of Reach.
And Jessica Woodruff, the Director of Housing Development of Reach.
so I'm going to start just by giving a quick review of the evolution of this development, just to, some of this might be repeating, but it's been a little while, so just help you get back into how we got here. Oh, it echoes, sorry. Thank you. So this project began with a vision that was based on a few inputs. Kenton neighborhood plans that had been around for actually some time and had a vision for this particular site in Kenton. Also TriMet, which owns the land, and so they had some priorities of what they wanted to see, the vision for the development there. There were some key zoning constraints that we'd been dealing with, so that kind of defined the vision in part. And Portland Housing Bureau also committed some funding at an early stage before there was a developer, and so PHB also had some influence again on the vision based on that funding commitment. So with that first sort of initial broad stroke vision had been painted, Reach came involved after a request for qualifications went out, and there was a committee that selected, there were numerous groups that applied. Reach was selected through that process. And then we took that initial vision that had been put together, and our job was to then go out and actually refine it and develop it into a real project plan, and then do the development. So we have been working on that ever since. We gathered additional community input from low-income residents living in Northeast, from neighborhood stakeholders, and of course, from all of you, the members of the committee also have given us input along the way. That's been very important. We ground tested the economics. We took the input we got from the different sources I mentioned, and we sought funding commitments, additional funding to determine what we could really do at this site. What we found is that the development that's feasible here and this is not new, this part, I'm still at the part that we've presented before, but we found that the development is feasible if it's focused on affordable housing. But the original vision had also included retail and market rate, and as you may recall from our past meeting, that proved out not to be economically feasible. So last time we were here with this project, we showed you that it was now 100% affordable housing project. So I'm getting to kind of the new, I think I pretty much got you up to date based on that. So, and I guess I should remind that the original vision had called for at least 150 affordable homes. That was like the original promise in the original vision. So the project, as it stands today, is 189 units of affordable housing. So we still are above the basic promise of affordable units, that, at least that component. We've strived to make this committee's input among our highest priorities. For example, adding larger apartments to the mix since our last presentation to you. So we're going to go through that in a minute. We are very grateful for the feedback we've gotten from this committee and the community along the way. It is key because we've had to evolve this project from that initial project vision to one that better addresses the ongoing displacement and discriminatory realities that make this work so urgent. So it makes sense that we've had to make changes. That's the work that we signed up for. We knew we were going to have to do this. It was going to be hard. And we're doing our best to lean into it. And we're optimistic that we're going to find a way to create something positive here that you can be proud of. Pamela and Jessica are going to review a little more detail about the current plan. This is the new scenario since we were last here.
Thank you. So as Dan was saying, one of the objectives for the proposed Argyle development is to maximize the number of family size units. And REACH has found that the balance of maximizing family size units and maintaining the zoning requirement is to provide 65 2- and 3-bedroom units. 47 of the proposed 2-bedroom units can accommodate families of 2 to 5 members. And then the 18 proposed 3-bedroom units can accommodate families of 3 to 7 members. So hopefully that unit mix provides for a range of family compositions, including the multi-generational households that we expect to be a part of this. And I just want to revert to the discussion that was happening before around the preference policy. And I think for me, what was not said was that in planning the unit sizes, where we've already got families on the preference policy, on the list, it helps us know who's seeking housing to plan and make sure that this unit mix that we are proposing meets the actual needs of the community. So in meeting the objective of having the larger family size units, there's also income requirements that go along with that. And I think it's good for us to understand, well, what's the range of incomes that can be served in those family size units? So there's a minimum income so that we can be assured that people can afford, but then there's also a maximum income as we're attempting to keep the units affordable. The units proposed for families making no more than 30% of the area median income will accommodate households whose incomes range from a minimum of $7,680 for one person to $30,300 for a family of 7. And the units proposed for families making no more than 60% of area median income will accommodate household incomes from a minimum of $15,384 for one person to a maximum of $60,600 for a family of 7. And there is no discrimination of income types, so this will allow families and individuals who have the housing vouchers would also qualify for occupancy there.
So in terms of where we are, we're in the construction development phase. As we already mentioned, we are awaiting news on a state lift application. And we are ready to submit for permits. We are just waiting to hear on that funding. So in terms of our site plan updates, so there is an update that Dan has already mentioned, but what was originally designed as commercial space is now flexible community space, and that is the green community room on the right. That is designed for the community, and Dan will go into more detail about what I mean by that. And on the left, or sort of in the middle, you'll see a green community room, which is really for tenants only. And the blue are sort of the common area spaces. And then what we've done in an attempt to just break down the scale of a building of this size, you'll see it is technically one building, but from this view, it looks like 2, because there is a breezeway through the middle to a semi-private courtyard. On the right, which is more the public, that's more of a public courtyard there. And then the far left courtyard by the tenant community room, it is meant to be private for tenants only.
So yeah, just to follow up, that space that was on the right, far right-hand side, the green space on the far right-hand side of the last slide, which is a community space, and just so it's clear what our vision for that is now, because that's changed. Since it's not a retail space for a commercial retail business, it will be a community space that's available for community programs and activities. So community partners, and we're already in conversation with some potential ones, community partners could use that space in an ongoing way. It's flexible how it could be scheduled, but for ongoing community programming. The primary audience for that programming would be residents in the building, so the community that we're intending to serve with this development, that would be the key audience for the community programs. But again, they'd be provided by community partners of all kinds. It would be non-commercial activities, so it wouldn't be programs that charge fees. So an example up here might be North by Northeast Community Health Center, which is one of the potential partners we've been speaking with who has an interest in using such a space. Could offer health promotion activities there that would be at no cost. Wouldn't be a full health clinic, right? They have a health clinic elsewhere, and that's where is a full service. This would be, again, community activities, flexible kinds of activities. And that's just an example. So we could have a whole menu of things. It wouldn't just be one thing. It could be many different things, depending on the day of the week or what have you. So I think that's really just that idea we wanted to share with you tonight, so you know that's how we're planning to use that space. And we think there's huge potential there, and we're going to continue conversations and outreach to partners to put together a more detailed plan on that.
Dan, could you tell me the square footage of that space, please? Do you know it?
4,000 square feet. So we're just going to walk through a few renderings of the latest design. So as you can see again from the bird's eye view, where it is one building, but we've attempted to break down that scale and make it have variation. This is a view of the community space that Dan was just talking about and the public courtyard space. And this is a view from the opposite end of where on the end with the private courtyard for tenants. I don't know if there's any comments on that before we want to go briefly into contracting.
Quick question, so the courtyards are paved? And I saw in your PowerPoint, you talked about WSI. Are you looking at something like a satellite that they have at New Columbia, or are you thinking based on specific projects they may be doing, they would come in and do training?
Probably closer to the latter. It wouldn't be a full service thing like at New Columbia. It would probably be a little more, again, activities, different days of the week. It may even be that the satellite at New Columbia, as an example, wants to do some things to try to drive people over there for more intensive services. You know what I mean? It's like an entry point, but it wouldn't probably be quite that level because there might be other partners using the same space, so it wouldn't be as dedicated space 9 to 5. Does that make sense? Yes.
Quick question, would the private courtyard be fenced?
No,
Okay.
at least that's not the plan.
So how are you going to keep it private for the tenants?
Well, this is what we always talk about between housing development and operations. So in housing development, we typically do start by assuming that that is through the way that the building is managed and that it goes well. If things don't go well, then that's something that we work together with to make sure that that we can adjust as the building is operating. But the intent is that we typically try not to enclose those spaces.
Wait, I have questions. So I don't know if I noticed, and this print is small even with my glasses on. Is there a playground? There's a lot of family units here, and I don't see playground space. I see courtyard space.
There is.
Courtyard.
I know it is hard to see.
Yeah.
So, and again, we still are working that out, but there is in the two spaces towards the left, so that middle space and the left space there are. In the public, the one that's meant to be truly public, there is not. And we're still advancing the design on what it will exactly be. Yes. And there is kitty corner from the park as well, so we assume that kids will use that too. How close to the park? It's kitty corner, it's just across the street.
So the last time that you were here, we were talking about approximately 8,000 square feet of community space. So has some of that space now been converted to apartments, or has some of that space been dedicated to this fitness room and the bike room and offices?
So it's hard without a pointer, but so yeah, we have added, so where you have the community room over to the right, and then you have the bike room in blue. There was additional commercial space that came down all the way to the street, and we have added units back.
So some of that commercial space that would have been, my concern is when there's too much commercial space, it's my banker hat on, when there's too much commercial space or community space and it's not revenue generating, that we're spending a lot of money to, I mean, we obviously need community space, we want to build this community, but I want to make sure that the project is ongoing and financially feasible. So that's my question there. So we did add revenue generating units in place of the 8,000 square feet of community space that we were talking about last time.
I should say so technically we did remove commercial space. We did not add number of units, right? So we originally had more units, but we added family-sized units based on the feedback we heard. So there's more rentable square footage.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes,
Yeah.
but not more units, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, so we're going to go quickly through, just give you a quick overview of the contracting strategy. And I know, how much time do we have? Okay. So I have Ed and Maurice with me, which I'll let them introduce themselves and go through.
Hello, I'm Ed Sloop with Walsh, the Senior Project Manager.
And I'm Maurice Raming with O'Neill Construction.
So we're going to give you our 5-minute spiel on our outreach program and what good faith effort means in our world. The good faith effort's already begun. That's good news. It's been going for many months. We've been engaging with subcontractors and suppliers throughout the budgeting process and researching target businesses that are in North and Northeast Portland, going zip code by zip code in the COVID database, for example, and also engaging with partners in the community. So we're partnering with O'Neill here. They're going to be our electrician, and with MCIP and NAMAC, so we can work through their network to hopefully generate more interest in the project. And then when it comes time to bid the project, we will use all the tools at our disposal. So we have a subcontractor and supplier database with 4,000 companies in it. So we will build a invitation to bid list that specifically targets the companies that can work on this project, and also specifically targets North and Northeast Portland businesses. We will have a number of select bid opportunities, which we're not going to go into tonight because that would take too long. Once the bids go out, we will follow. That goes out in most of the time to most companies through email, but we'll also advertise. We'll follow up with phone calls. We'll have face-to-face meetings. We'll go to forums like this to try to engage the community and make sure that they're aware of the job. And then when all the numbers come in, so the goal there is to get 30%, which happy to say we're already there in terms of the companies that have already engaged in the budgeting process. So our goal is to make that number as high as possible and engage with as many companies as we can, make sure everybody knows that there's lots of opportunity. I have probably used my time, so I'm going to pass it to Maurice. He's going to talk about workforce development and women and minorities in the workforce. He's our subject matter expert.
Thank you for having me. I'll be quick because I was told that I can talk about this subject forever, so I'll be short, or try to be, so feel free to pull the hook if I talk too long. So one of the things that we're looking at is not only on the contracting side, but also on the workforce side. And how we look at doing that is if you think about a funnel. So we reach out to certain organizations, or as many organizations as possible. We're talking like Maui, the Urban League, and a number of others to kind of look at people that are interested in the construction industry. Once we identify those people, what we work with is we work with the pre-apprenticeship programs, OTI, PYB, and Constructing Hope, for example, with those organizations, which we have a long history and a long relationship with. We sit on a number of their boards. We work with them in other aspects to actually help get their people into the construction industry when they finish the pre-apprenticeship programs. So as we do this reach out, we reach out to different organizations and look at their membership and ask if they're interested in the construction industry. Then turn around and send them through the pre-apprenticeship programs. Working with our trade partners, our apprenticeship programs, that gives them the ability to then turn around and have, some of them we have direct access to. Others we work closer with to try to make sure that these people can get into those good paying jobs. So as we go through that, what we have is we end up, and a lot of times we have subcontractors that say, we'd love to do the work, but the fact is that we don't have the workforce to do it. And so by doing this and working this collaboration, we can provide them with the workforce with this early on ability to basically identify people that are interested and then align those people to those subcontractors. So we're excited about that. As far as working with the contractors themselves, there's a few things that happen. Again, we're working with different organizations to basically help them in early estimates, basically being able to help them put together bid proposals and get an understanding of how many units there are and what the current costs of those should be, so that when they're bidding, they have that intellectual property that they can take on to other projects. So it's not just them doing this one project, but them being able to have the learning capacity to move on to other projects. And again, when we talked about looking at their workforce, we're able to align workers with them. So they're able to not only build their capacity by us helping them estimate, but also have those people that went through the programs that actually have a little bit of a leg up to understand what needs to happen on the project. One of the things that we're working closely with them also with is cash flow. What happens a lot of times with a lot of these small businesses, they're looking at their cash flow and they haven't necessarily done a cash flow projection. By looking at not only this project, but other projects that they're doing, we kind of work together with them to align it, to make sure that it's a success for them. And again, giving them that intellectual property to be able to be a successful small business. This is one of the things that we look at. So when we talk to these small businesses and we understand what their needs and their issues are, we're really trying to address them with this project. We're not just trying to give people jobs, we're trying to give them careers. We're not just trying to work with these small businesses to be a success on this business, but we're working with them to be a success throughout their business lives. So we're really excited about this project, and we feel like there's a bunch of opportunities that we can provide for these contractors. So we're excited, and we're excited for the workforce as well. Thank you.
So lastly, just our next steps. We are anxiously awaiting those state announcements. We will continue in the meantime to work with our peers that we were up here with earlier, with Portland Housing Bureau and the community to keep refining what we can while we wait. And if our funding application to the state is unsuccessful, that's what we would hope, that there is a potential to fill that gap another way and just move forward, submit our permits, and get going. If that's not possible, then we would plan to come back and talk to you about the option of trying to subdivide the land and phase the project.
Quick question, I don't know that it was identified specifically. What is the gap?
$5.9 million.
Thank you. Any questions from the Oversight?
The 5.9 million gap you have, that's on your project at Reach, right? What's the difference between what you are facing now and then what you were facing when you were putting the commercial space in the building, which so much the community was looking forward to having there to create more of a neighborhood of people moving in and out of and around the project?
Yes, that was about an additional $4 million in gap.
Any other questions from the Oversight?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to make a comment. I think the last time I heard about the project, I had some questions about the participation. And so I appreciate your report today and your aspiration, especially since you put a plus sign behind it. And you talked about some of the things that are real issues for minority women-owned businesses to be able to be successful, and how you're looking to address it. So that's great. And I'm assuming when you talk about partners, you're talking about those like NAMCO and Awami and MISO and all of them other acronyms. Okay.
I would like to thank Maurice in particular. I'm glad that you're on this project because I've watched you work in the community on especially helping our community get into the trades. And I've really watched you not only work at it on the high school level, which I think is really important, but really working with the other union programs, apprenticeship programs. You've taken it on as your personal mission outside of your actual company. And so I really want to say thank you, because I think it's a big project. And to see that 30+ number, it requires someone that has a lot of collaboration. So we know it's not easy, but thank you, because building the capacity is crucial for our success. So thank you.
So I want to, before I make my comments about it, one of our members who could not be here has also been very involved and has met personally and come to some of the community engagement activities around this particular project, and that's Marlon Holmes. And he sent an email in relationship to this present iteration, your response to the feedback from the Oversight Committee. And Leslie, if you'd read that for us.
So Marlon says, I did meet with REACH about the Argyle project. Their updates to the plan look a lot better than prior proposals, given the strain of meeting all of our asks, appeasing the requirement of density, and meeting with the Kenton Neighborhood Association, and the unforeseen gap in funding as a result of the new national atmosphere created by the Chief Executive Officer. I'd like to add that I greatly appreciate the idea of the new community space concept.
Yeah, I think we would each, well, I will echo many of those sentiments, to see family-sized units, to see the redesign to be reflective of what our whole conversation has been around. That's absolutely supported. Super excited about the 30% plus, and to hear you articulate that's the goal, to make it as high as possible. And Maurice, your engagement and your history of doing that is exciting. So hopefully the gap will be closed and we can get this thing up and rolling as quickly as possible. Thank you very much for your presentation. All right, for those who have hung out, I have 5 cards filled out for people who wanted to make comments. If you have filled one out and I don't have it, please make sure that it gets handed in. You can put it in the hands of Sawyer. Thank you. Yeah, so if you have one of these and you'd like to share a thought, please make sure to do so. We're going to begin with Mr. Posey. And if you would announce yourself, and sir, you will have 3 minutes. I believe you. I've got faith in you. I do.
Well, good evening. My name is James Posey, and I'm here really representing the NAACP, and Jeff Strange was the original person who's been here, and he had to do something else with the NAACP, so you all get me. Essentially, what I'd like to say, first off, looking at the information that you all provided, for example, the piece when you were talking about 70% of the participants are people of color. It would be great if you guys would really disaggregate those numbers and talk specifically about which groups you're serving, because when we talk about people of color, it might be somebody from the moon that I haven't met yet. So if you could just basically be able to talk about those in a stratified way in all categories, not only in terms of the race, but you know, their time in the community and any other information you might have. And secondly, you know, for a person dropping in out of the moon, it would be nice if somehow all of the information that you all have shared could be accessible via a website or some way in which the average person living around the corner would have access to this information so they can actually weigh in. So again, the issues that you all are talking about are very important. And I was here for the last presentation, and I just want to be clear. I'll provide you with the article that I did some months back about PDC and the utilization of minority contractors. Did you all know that WASH did about 95% of all the work done on housing projects for the last 10 years exclusively? And I would just suggest to you all that you all take a look at their record, not what they say, but what they've actually done. I want to be very clear. There's no aspersions on WASH or anybody else up here. And so I looked at your presentation here this morning, or this afternoon, and I saw MCIP and NAMAC. You mentioned NAMAC Sheila, I haven't seen any attempts to have NAMAC come to this meeting and present what their membership is. And I think you all need to focus on the organization's broad range as opposed to, one or two individuals. I want to be real clear. While I am very, should I say, nonpartisan in the utilization of unions, but unions typically haven't been favorable to Black people. Y'all know that for a fact. And so you need to be very cautious about that and make sure that the unions walk their talk versus what they say they were going to do. And I can be very specific about the numbers, and I'd like to be able to share those numbers with you at some point in time. So you need to get both sides of the story and be very precise about whether money is really going to trickle back down to the communities you say you all are representing. And the only way to do that is to follow the money and more importantly, follow the people, because over the last several years, there's only been, you can almost count them on your hands, the folk who have come back to this community who have really benefited in a material way. And so for those organizations who say they've been doing a lot, been saying they've been doing stuff, do a longitudinal look at who those individuals are they've helped. You all probably know they live next door to you or across the street from you or something like that. So we can actually see those individuals. I see them, and I'm hoping that you all will take the time to really penetrate all the hoopla and really look down and see who we're talking about and who we're really helping. I know my time's up.
Thank you, sir.
I'd be happy to help you out.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Were there any other cards? So we have several from PCRI. We've got 4. Suzanne, Travis, and then Linda and Andrea, I believe, wanted to come together.
We haven't coordinated any of this, so I hope my boss, who's back there, doesn't get mad at me.
You've got 3 minutes.
My name is Suzanne Vodricus-House. I work at PCRI. I'm the financial educator there, and I work daily trying to get people mortgage ready. Many of the people I work with are in the preference policy. I kind of want to bring it down a little bit micro, and what I want to say is that if you look at this new concept of bringing on Portland Housing Center as sort of a screener, a list keeper, I actually feel that this is not a good idea. Now, I don't understand if are we going to reassess all of the people that are already in the process, all 45 of these families? If so, in order to get into this program, the people that are in this program have been historically traumatized. We are putting up barrier after barrier after barrier, and I feel like this would be yet another barrier. As Portland Housing Center will tell you, when you're doing an assessment, it's more than just the figures. It's more than just the how much income do you have, how much debt do you have, what's your student loan. It's really about developing trust. It's also about expecting people to give you time. And when I have a participant that comes to me, they spend a lot of time with me, and I end up getting to know them intimately, learning things more than just the figures, learning everything from medical situations, familial relationships, scams they may have undertaken, addictions that they deal with. And I think that if you're continuing to ask people to provide all of this information, and it's not just going to stay with me, it's now going to get transferred to somebody else, I'm giving them yet more trauma. And I feel that that's not fair to the people who are the participants in this program. We shouldn't have to expect them to spend more time. When I read what the reasoning for this was, you say, to achieve the goals to support 65 preference policy households to becoming home buyers. Creating that list, creating that screening doesn't make them more mortgage ready quicker. It's about the relationship, about having action plans that they go through with us day by day by day. And so I feel like we've just added an extra layer of administration, of bureaucracy, which is yet again going to be perceived as another barrier, another thing that we're going to be doing to traumatize the people that we have already traumatized over and over and over again. That's it. I did it in 3 minutes, yay.
You did. 17 seconds less. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And you are?
Good evening. I'm Travis Phillips with PCRI, as you heard earlier. I'm going to try to be even more brief than Suzanne, and wanted to just give some appreciation for the consideration that the Housing Bureau has taken in terms of expanding the opportunity area for the families moving into homeownership outside of the URA. For those of you who've been on the committee for a while, you may recall that that's actually something that PCRI advocated for some time ago. And as you're considering your decisions about how to implement that, I just want to refer back to you, and for those of you who weren't on the committee before, and I think this request came in before Director Callahan was in place, but I want to just reiterate that PCRI has some particular opportunity sites which we would love to develop that are outside of the URA. They are within the close-in northeast area, and are some particularly well-situated sites that we'd love to make available to the families that we're serving that are moving into homeownership, and would like for you all to consider that that might be something that we could do.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate it. Andrea, Linda?
Good evening. I'm gonna try to read fast. Let's see.
Well, you know what? It's two of you. We'll give you 6 minutes.
Okay.
How's that work?
Works.
Look at that. Go ahead.
PCRI is
Before you do, for those who do not know who you ladies are, if you would identify who you are, it'd be great.
I'm Linda from PCRI, the Homeownership Program Coordinator. PCRI is sending this message in follow-up to the Portland Housing Bureau's recommendation to the North and Northeast Housing Communities or Strategy Community Oversight Committee to contract with the third-party assessment of participants currently being counseled by community organizations awarded interstate tax increment resources for homeownership, the homeownership process. The funds are to provide displaced residents misled by city promises a chance to return to the historic neighborhoods by providing them with an opportunity to purchase a home in the interstate URA. For this purpose, the City of Portland adopted its preference policy, a replicate of PCRI's right to return policy, as noted in its Pathway 1000 displacement mitigation plan. The difference between the two plans is the preference policy's requirements for residents to extensively show proof of prior residence in North and Northeast Portland. After considering PHB's planned requirement of a third-party assessment of households participating in PCRI's homeownership program, we feel compelled to respond in writing about the proposed added requisite. This requirement appears to be an unnecessary use of time and resources, particularly in the if the information is going to be used to justify why the Portland Housing Bureau cannot account for more home buyers for its preference policy. Additionally, with respect for the need to justify the lack of home buying activity, we find the effort to identify the cause for this perceived failing not a failing at all. Rather, it's just a miscalculation by the Portland Housing Bureau. And this miscalculation occurred because PHB did not consult with the organizations expected to do the work. It was inappropriate for PHB, Portland Housing Bureau,
to project a timeline without the involvement of the organizations participating in it. Further, the minimization of the impacted areas to just the interstate urban renewal area was short-sighted. Although the establishment of the interstate urban renewal area significantly exacerbated the current displacement problem, the parameters of the neighborhood should have been given additional consideration and expansion into other areas of Northeast Portland. Displaced residents lived in other areas of North and Northeast Portland and not just the established interstate urban renewal area. There are a number of factors one must consider when reviewing why there haven't been enough home buying activities. For lower income displaced residents in the urban renewal area, limiting factors include availability of homes in specific price ranges, and they don't exist. The problem, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. The problem, finitely described as mortgage readiness, ignores the complexities of serving the problem. I missed that. The affordability aspect, the city is looking to fund homes in the area of the city that has become one of the most popular and expensive areas in the city to live. This is an area where households at median income and above can hardly afford to purchase a home. PCRI, who has allocated was allocated the least amount of funds from the preference policy, has produced and supported 21 households to purchase since the rollout of this program. Unfortunately, only 5 households were able to purchase in the interstate urban renewal area due to the lack of affordability. PHB invested in micro condominiums to sell in the interstate urban renewal area, and that didn't go as hoped. Now that the process is riddled with obstacles, not just mortgage readiness and affordability issues, it's misguiding to insinuate the organizations on the ground and doing the work is the problem, and to simplify it to just mortgage readiness and not the organization's capacity to get buyers mortgage ready.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Debnam, also with PCRI. And I'm just going to pick up where Linda left off. Basically, we just don't believe that the plan was properly thought out. We believe the city reacted quickly, basically, to the response of the last Oversight Committee meeting, and we understand why. However, we just don't believe that the response was really, again, properly thought out. But we believe it's time for collaboratively discussing the realities of the situation and creating and implementing problem-solving strategies and tactics. At PCRI, we do not see the issue as a monumental failing. This has been noted in prior communication. We are again sharing our thoughts with the committee. We found the newly created process to be unwarranted and again, not the best use of time and resources. Further, we find the process to be organizationally divisive and condescending versus respectfully collaborative. Each organization should be given an opportunity to elaborate independently, not collectively, on their specific program. This is the process in place for CDC reporting requirements. PCRI is not several of one. PCRI is one of several. Each CDC has programmatic differences. If organizational assessments are required, the city should do the assessment within its capacity versus engaging a sister organization or a CDC involved in similar work to do it. We have sincere regard and respect for the Portland Housing Center, yet we feel employing the Portland Housing Center for this purpose equates to the mayor, Wheeler, engaging the Mayor Doyle Beaverton Housing Department for an assessment of the Portland Housing Bureau. PCRI has started construction on 10 homes in the interstate URA. These homes are created specifically and purposefully for former North and Northeast Portland residents, currently in PCRI's homeownership counseling program. We could have started the construction of 7 more homes, and PHB had allowed for the substitution of interstate TIF resources for CDBG. Former Director Krieger said yes at first, and then the agreement to allow for the exchange was rescinded. The TIF funds are restricted to an area that is restrictive in itself. The market is tight and new construction takes time. When PHB set aside the resources to quiet the community, it would have been beneficial to establish a monitoring process, one that would allow for corrective measures. PHB is being held accountable for not doing something good and right fast enough. Housing development takes time. Without land, it takes even more time. Fortunately, we have land. However, it is not all in interstate. Imagine what would be if PCRI could build in other places in North and Northeast, even Southeast Portland. Serving people who have historically experienced long-term and ongoing predatory barriers and who have been marginalized and have limited income to address these historical barriers are at a disadvantage. And although they are not insurmountable, they will take time to overcome. If it were a few homes needed, it would take less time. If it were available homes to purchase, it would take less time. If we had mortgage-ready buyers, it would take less time. If the city was flexible and amendable to the market it was hoping to penetrate, it would take less time. I do not believe analyzing each organization's performance or lack thereof as if it were one and the same is not an answer to the perceived slow progress. PCRI's counsels residents and transitions them into homeownership regularly. They are not all in the interstate urban renewal area. Using one criterion, buyer readiness, for the lack of homeownership in one district is a miscalculation of the need and the goal. Organizations participating in the program are not equal. We each offer a variety of counseling service aimed to address the population we are individually missioned to serve. PCRI, as an affordable housing developer and rental property manager, we specifically elected to use city resources that can go directly to community residents. We do not believe PHB has been inept. We believe PHB should have been engaging housing organizations involved in the program regularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your presence. Thank you very much. Thanks for a prepared and well-presented letter. Appreciate that. It can be,
Could we get a copy?
Oh, yeah.
To the committee? Thank you. I think it needs to go through to PHB or Dr. Holt.
Thank you very much. What I was about to say is that any opportunity in this moment, especially in a live setting, it can be difficult to articulate your thoughts. So I appreciate the preparation to do so and to be very clear. I will also state for the record, so that, and this is for the general body, that one of the things that I'm a pretty stringent around is when we give a time frame, and I give a timeline. It's not specifically reflective of the ladies today. We have more time, so we had time on the end. But I just don't want us thinking that there's this open-ended, we're just going to go and do what we do, because it's about respecting those who are here and making sure that we're honoring what we say we're going to do. Again, I appreciate all of those who spoke and brought information tonight. Thank you very much. Our next meeting is July 12th, and I trust that you'll be engaged. Look forward to talking to you. Have a good night.